Hey guys, this is a guide on how to hunt the cultist that I did want to make since there really isn't much online for resources on these guys. And in case some of you guys are struggling with the Broadcast Part 5, Night Sweep, or Hell on Earth Part 2 tasks, or even if you did just want to start trying to farm these guys for their gear and potential high tier loot, since the priests and cultist warriors do have a good chance of having high tier armor and also some of the more rare items in the game, then hopefully this guide will help you guys out. Now, actually fighting the cultists is incredibly difficult and arguably one of the hardest things to do in Tarkov, especially since with the low spawn rate, you do really have to make use of any opportunity that you do get when fighting them. And with the low spawn rate, it means that you don't really get many opportunities to practice fighting them in the first place. So because of this, you are essentially going to want to run some of your big boy ammo and your meta guns if you are hunting them specifically. And in the background, I will have some examples of specific gun builds that you can use, but basically you will want to stick to the calibers of 7.62 by 51 NATO, or even the SIG hybrid ammo, or if you wanted to run 54R in an SVD, then that would be a pretty good option as well. If you're ballsy, then you could run an ASH 12 with PS12B. You could also use a VSS or a VAL, especially if you are going to be in the close range. That gun does shoot fast enough and do enough damage that you will delete almost anything incredibly fast. But at the end of the day, then you can make any gun or ammo that you are comfortable with work for fighting these guys. I just tend to stay away from 5.56 or 5.45 when I am cultist hunting or boss hunting in general, just because they tend to not work very well for me and there are better options. And honestly, this wipe 7.62 by 39 has been atrocious, so I have stayed away from that as well. But again, because they are full auto weapons, then the 7.62 by 39 could be an option. It's just I find that the ammo is acting almost like it's bugged this wipe, so I have been leaving it in my stash. Now, realistically, any of these options will work if you are able to land headshots, because the priest does have a total of 850 health points, which does include 50 to the head and 200 to the thorax. And the priest also does not wear any body armor and also no head protection, so he will be pretty vulnerable to almost any round. Now, as for the cultist warriors or followers, typically there is going to be 3 to 4 of them, and they also have 50 head health with no real head protection other than the occasional shattered mask. And they also have 850 total health, but they will have 220 thorax hit points. And on top of the 20 extra thorax health, then they also do wear body armor that ranges from a tier 2 P.A.K.A. all the way up to a tier 6 hex grid or slick. So because of these higher tiered armors that the warriors are running, then it can definitely feel like you are shooting rubber bullets sometimes when you are fighting these guys. However, when you're the one being shot by them, then it definitely won't feel like rubber bullets because they basically only run the meta ammo for any gun that they're currently using. And I do have a picture on the screen right now that does show the list of guns with the ammo beside them that they can be using. And as you can see, it is basically BT, SPP, SNB, M62, quite a few guns that do have 7.62 or 5.45 BP. And then there are also a few guns that will use flesh ammo like Quakemaker as well. Now, some information about the cultists that is going to be helpful to know when hunting or fighting them. So in terms of finding the cultists, they do only spawn between the hours of 22 and 07 on 5 different maps. And if you are in a raid just before 2200, then there is the chance that when it does cross over the time threshold, then they can spawn mid-raid for you. And if they are in your current raid, and then if your raid does go beyond 0700, even if you are in the middle of fighting them, then they will despawn. And I do know this because it did happen to me in the past. But if you did happen to kill any of the cultists before the 0700 cutoff, then the bodies will remain in the raid for you to loot. Now, another method that you can potentially use for the cultists is that if you do possess a sacred amulet, then you can wear this into a raid by placing it in your special slot while trying to hunt the cultists. And when you are wearing this on your PMC, then all the cultists on the map do not attack you unless provoked. However, one thing to keep in mind is that this amulet is only good for 7 raids before it does become destroyed, but you can also equip it and unequip it after putting it on and then leave it in your stash to be able to retain the uses as well. And now the way that you can routinely get your hands on this amulet is by having Lightkeeper unlocked and completing his task Snatch. And after you have done this task, then you can buy it for 3 intel folders and 1000 USD from Lightkeeper. Or the other way that you can get this amulet, as some of you may already have it, is as a reward for completing an event where it was given as a task reward. And just so that you guys know, the spawn rates are usually quite low at the start of wipes, being around 5 to 10% for customs, woods, and also shoreline. But the spawn rates will increase gradually as the wipe progresses, and sometimes we will even have events, especially around Halloween and also the end of wipe, where they will have a 100% spawn chance on certain maps. But at the time that I am making this video, the spawn rate is 20% on customs and woods, 15% on shoreline, and then a measly 2% on nighttime factory and ground zero for level 21 plus. So I wouldn't even really consider these last 2 maps as a feasible option. Now, during a raid, the cultists won't always aggro you immediately as soon as they do see you. Instead, sometimes they will actually be passive and just try to stay hidden in a bush like most of the people who end up playing this game. and then they just hope that you won't actually see them. But if somebody else has already aggroed them, or if you do get too close, shoot them or throw a grenade or flash by them, then they will aggro on you immediately. Another important thing to note is that the cultists usually do make absolutely zero noise or audio, which does include no footstep audio, just like Bird Eye from the goons. However, the cultists will also not make any audio when you do throw grenades, so you can't use that trick to try and locate them like you can with Bird Eye, or like the other bosses when you're trying to pinpoint their position without having to peek out and get lasered. And with the cultists, they also won't respond if you spam F1 to try and make your PMC yell at them, and they also make no sounds when you do shoot them. They are literally silent almost always. And the reason why I do say almost always is because when there is snow on the maps, then you can faintly hear the cultist footsteps when they are running outside on this snow. However, if they are running inside of a building, or if it's not the winter season, then they will revert back to having their slippers on and being completely silent. Now, another challenge when dealing with the cultists is that they're cold-blooded, so it's like they have an SJ-12 popped at all times. So even if you do try to run a thermal, it really won't make your life any easier, since they don't show up how you're used to seeing enemies appear on your thermal scopes. And it honestly makes it so that you can't really abuse the nighttime thermal strategy. And then on top of all this, then the cultists do have completely broken AI to the point that they will track you through mountains, bushes, trees, and other hard cover. And that obviously makes it very challenging to even attempt to peek them, or even to try and figure out where it is that they are laying prone in a bush, because as soon as you do show a single pixel of your PMC from behind the cover, then they will start trying to take off any limb that does show, which obviously makes it very challenging to fight them from a distance, since they can easily laser you from 150 meters. So if you do decide that you want to try and push them, just be aware that you should definitely pre-med anytime that you will be in the open around them, since the top tier ammo that they do use will destroy your armor, and you're going to end up getting peppered by them as soon as you do try and rotate. So if you are in the open any amount of time, and if they end up taking off a limb or causing a fracture while you're in the open, then you're basically going to be stuck limping, and then you're going to be dead in the water and deleted very quickly. Now, if you are lucky enough to actually find the cultists in a raid and get to engage with them, then they will try to ambush you and attempt to stab you with their knives, which will infect you with the unknown toxin. And this will start to tick at your health pretty rapidly, and even if you do end up popping a propofol and also healing on top of it, usually it won't be enough to be able to keep up. And basically you are going to have to pop an antidote, which the treatment for the unknown toxin at the moment that I am making this video is the XTG12 or the Perfotorin stimulants, both of which do actually remove the unknown toxin debuff. Augmentin used to be used for this as well, however currently it does not seem to remove the debuff, even though it is classified as an antibiotic pill, but that may end up being altered in the future, which is why I'm mentioning it now. Or your other option, if you do end up getting infected by the toxin, which is not a fix but rather a temporary band-aid to give you some time to make your way to extract and potentially get out of raid alive, is to pop a green ETG stim, which will actually out-heal the toxin for the short healing aspect of the stim being 60 seconds. And by doing this, it will allow you to make some headway in making your way towards the extract to potentially get out of raid and save your kit. But if you are too far away from the extract and it's unlikely that you will make it out, then if your kit is insured, then I recommend that you drop your loot in a bush somewhere before you end up dying to the toxin. Now, as mentioned earlier, you do have 5 maps where the cultists can spawn, being Custom, Shoreline Woods, Factory, and Ground Zero, but the 2 best options will be on Customs and Shoreline at the resort, since you can get closer to the cultists and make sure that your shots hit. So on Customs, they can spawn all around or inside the fortress area, but they can also spawn or be pulled all the way over by Crack House and also anywhere around the mechanic repair shop area. And then on the opposite side of Fortress, they can also be pulled all the way over by the train cars outside the old gas station as well. And that's going to be depending upon if they do get into an engagement with another player and pulled over there. Now, usually on Customs, you will have the highest spawn chance for cultists among all the other maps throughout a wipe, usually starting between 5 and 8%, and then usually it will gradually increase as the wipe progresses, and then the current spawn rate for Customs is at 20%. And then on Shoreline, the cultists do have 2 main spawns, with the first being inside or around the east and west wings of the resort, and this will be the preferred area on this map by far to fight the cultists, or the other spawn area is going to be just above the swamp and the tall grass around or on top of this huge boulder. And this is going to be in the area where the notorious Terminator scavs tend to spawn, and on Shoreline they will typically have a 5 to 8% spawn rate at the start of a wipe as well, and then throughout the wipe then their spawn rate will gradually increase similarly to Customs and also Woods, but at the time that I'm making this video, Shoreline is sitting at a 15% spawn chance. And then on to Woods, the cultists will have 2 potential spawns here that will be located at each of the cultist circles, being one at the northern part of the map at this sunken village, and then the other spawn will be at the cultist circle in between the checkpoint area and also the sawmill part of the map. Now on Woods, they will usually start a wipe with again a 5 to 8% spawn chance, which will again gradually increase at a similar rate to Customs and also Shoreline, and at the time that I'm making this video, then Woods is actually identical to Customs at a 20% spawn rate. And then moving on to Factory and Ground Zero. So because of the size of these maps, then you should anticipate running into the cultists basically anywhere on the maps if you do go into a nighttime raid. But as mentioned earlier, they do have a very low, basically non-existent spawn chance at only 2%. And usually it will stay there for a majority of the wipe, but I have seen it increase up to 10% on Factory during a wipe in the past. But at the time that I am making this video, Ground Zero and Factory are both currently still sitting at a 2% spawn rate. And although I did give you guys the usual and current spawn rates, just know that they can actually fluctuate outside the normal parameters throughout a wipe, especially during an event, where as mentioned earlier, certain events can provide a 100% spawn rate for the cultists on specific or all maps. But the general everyday spawn rates for the 5 potential maps are pretty rare, except for some of you lucky ones with the God tier RNG. Now in terms of what map that I do recommend or prefer to fight the cultists on, I tend to lean towards custom, since you do have a lot of cover that you can utilize from inside of the fortress or also inside of the mechanic repair shop or the crack house if you can pull the cultists into those areas. And one of the benefits of using these buildings is that you can get yourself into a room with only one or limited entryways. And since you honestly can't hear the bastards, in this way you won't have to have your head on a swivel continually and then end up checking your flanks or behind yourself. You can basically just focus on the entrance and then create a funnel that allows you to focus on the one entry point, which is going to make your life a lot easier. Especially since the lack of audio, the aimbot, and then the bush camping makes for a very corny interaction when fighting the cultists usually. And because of that, you basically want to use anything that you can in order to get an advantage when fighting these guys. But one negative thing to keep in mind about customs is that Fortress is such a massive hotspot on the map that you will likely be interrupted or third-partied while fighting the cultists here, which makes an already difficult fight even more challenging and aggravating. So usually if you are on nighttime customs raids and they are popping, then I would try my luck on a different map. Now if customs isn't going well for you, then Shoreline is going to be another solid option, preferably at the health resort spawn. Because at this location you are going to be able to use the rooms for cover similarly to customs, but the resort also adds the ability to close doors on yourself, which you can't do at the fortress area. And this is going to end up adding more time to react to the cultists trying to sneak in. And also at the resort, then you also have a large area on either side to work with, and also multiple floors and cover to rotate if need be, which can be helpful. Now on the other hand, the spawn just above the swamp will be quite a bit more challenging, but you can still use the hills for some cover, and also you are able to maneuver around with some wide flanks if need be. But the long grass that is surrounding the cultist spawn at this area can be very challenging to see them through, and there is also a lot of open space when you are trying to move over exactly where they have spawned, so you can definitely be caught out in the middle of a push, as well as there being no real way to create a funnel or protect your back in this area. So with their silent footsteps, then you can easily be snuck up on from behind, and with the top tier ammo that they typically have, then you'll be done for very quickly. Now, as for woods, I typically try to avoid fighting them on this map, since nighttime woods is littered with thermal users, and you really don't end up having much cover in either area other than a few boulders, some dips in the terrain, and obviously some trees. But because it is also wide open in the area between checkpoint and the sawmill, you again can't really create a funnel to protect your back, so you can easily be snuck up on by the sneaky boys at any time. And even up at the abandoned village, there is going to be more cover, being that you are in a village surrounded by dilapidated buildings, but there is a bunch of tall grass here that keeps the cultists very well hidden, and I've honestly never been successful in this location in the few times that I have seen them here. So because I haven't really figured out the good or safe strategy to fight them on woods, then I can't exactly recommend that you guys go here to hunt them at this time. And just that you guys know, it doesn't mean that you can't fight them well on woods, because I know that there are a lot of people who purposely go to woods in order to fight the cultists, and they do have a lot of success in doing so. It's just likely a skill issue on my part or a lack of experience fighting them on woods, but the previous two options, being customs and shoreline, are going to provide superior results for the casual or regular Tarkov enjoyer in my opinion, since you can have a little bit more room for error with them. And as for Factory and Ground Zero, I don't even bother trying there, because at the 2% spawn rate, and with my luck, I would be better off trying to win the lottery than to get a cultist spawn on either of these maps. But essentially, if they do spawn in, then you want to try to create yourself a funnel, as I do keep saying, just because it will be safer for you. And a last thing for you guys to keep in mind is that as you are hunting the cultists, you can also start collecting cultist knives for the skier task night sweep, where you do have to turn in found and raid cultist knives. However, this is an optional task that is not required for Kappa or anything, so totally up to you guys if you did want to bother attempting it. So hopefully you guys found this guide useful and it does help you to complete this task. Thank you guys so much for stopping by and watching my guide on this, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day.